Good morning, Professor Oura.
Good morning, Professor. How are you?
Morning. Good morning, everybody. Yeah, very good, thanks. How are you?
Not
Pretty
bad at
good.
all. Glad you could join us this morning.
Good to be here.
Thank you.
Right. So we wanted to talk a bit about the announcement by AstraZeneca recently. Professor has two F's or two.
Two S's.
I'm a little embarrassed by that. By the announcement by AstraZeneca, I just had a brain fog for a second there while I was typing that they stopped manufacturing and distributing their COVID-19 vaccine because of some instances where research has shown that in some small cases, a few cases, they didn't quantify how many cases that was or how large the study was, that they've been linked to some adverse effects and stuff like that. Could you give us an overview first of all, and then we'll discuss, what the implications are for that for other vaccine makers?
Sure. So as you said last week, they removed the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine. There were quite a number of reasons for that. One of the reasons was, of course, as you said, these small, well, these quite significant side effects if you get them, but very rare side effects. And this has been, we've known about these side effects for quite a long time now. And they say for about every 10 million people that have been vaccinated, there have been about 66 cases of blood clots in veins and about 7 cases of blood clots in the brain. So we're looking, at very small amounts of people, but if you get the blood clots, they can be very significant. Not everybody dies, but they can be very significant. So that's sort of come up. I think it has to be said at this stage that the AstraZeneca vaccine has played an incredibly important role in the COVID-19 pandemic. When you think that around in 2021, about 2.5 million doses of the 2.5 billion doses, that is, of the doses of the vaccine was given, and an estimation. They estimated that it saved around 6.3 million lives, and the significance about this AstraZeneca COVID vaccine, and I'm really sad for the company that's got so much bad press, is because they produced a vaccine that they didn't make a lot of money out of. They kept the prices extremely low, so this vaccine, and only this vaccine, could be given to people in developing countries and poor countries, and it was all around the world. That's why 2.5 billion doses were given. And it did an enormous amount to stop or reduce the amount of deaths and severe disease in people all around the world. So it was a great vaccine. Now we're in this situation. Now we're in a completely different situation now, when we're not giving the vaccine so much, so the demand has dipped enormously. And the other key thing about the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine is it's more complicated to make than the RNA vaccines, the Moderna and the Pfizer vaccines. So it's more difficult to adapt and change according to how the virus changes. And that's critical, because Moderna and the mRNA vaccines, they can change them relatively easy. They've also now, Moderna and Pfizer, have sorted out the cold chain, so they've made it easier to transport at reasonable temperatures. Remember, it had to be sent at sort of -80, really cold conditions on liquid nitrogen and dry ice and things like that. Now that's sorted. So my final, AstraZeneca now that vaccine is no more, but it played a really significant role across the world in stopping the pandemic.
Is it that people who would have received the AstraZeneca vaccine at that time have anything to be worried about?
No, nothing to be worried about. Nothing to be worried about now. So these very, very rare side effects happen relatively soon after you've had the vaccine. It's something we still don't quite understand what happens, and it might be something to do with. Remember, we talked about how these vaccines are made, and the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine has a little part of the virus is actually put into an adenovirus, so another virus, and they think it might be to do with that other virus that causes some sort of immune response that affects the production of what we call platelets, and platelets are really important in clotting, and so it causes a reduction in platelets. So very, very rare, very small amount of people get some blood clots that they wouldn't have got. So somehow these blood clots are formed, and if those blood clots go to the wrong places, like the brain and other areas, they can cause problems. So that happens relatively soon after you have the vaccine. So people who've had, like me, I've had 3, I think, AstraZeneca vaccines. You've got nothing to worry about now.
Those odds that you described, is it 66 in every 10 million?
Sorry, what was that? Can you repeat that?
The statistics that you identified earlier on as to the number of people who develop these issues, for those who receive it, is it 66 per 10 million?
Per 10 million. There is out of the 10 million people vaccinated, there was found to be an extra 66 cases of blood clots in veins and about 7 in the brain. So it's a relatively small amount, but of course is significant if you get them.
So is it that AstraZeneca is ceasing the production of the vaccine for economic reasons, or for the reasons of the side effects?
I think much more likely to be economic reasons, to be honest with you. I don't think there's a demand for the vaccine anymore. As I said, it costs an enormous amount of money. You'd have to ask AstraZeneca this, obviously, but it costs an enormous amount of money to change that vaccine and put a new bit of the virus that matches, that the latest Omicron, the latest things have changed. And mRNA vaccines are being bought now all around the world. They're being bought, the Moderna, the Pfizer, because they did prove to be, and we can remember this, they did prove to be a little bit more safer and effective. They were more effective when you looked at the figures. I mean, AstraZeneca was good, but when the figures came out, the Moderna, the mRNA vaccines were slightly safer and slightly more effective. And now they've adapted them and changed them according to what viruses, with the type of COVID that we have circulating. So I don't think AstraZeneca, as I said before, made very much money. I don't think they made very much money out of their vaccine because they didn't charge very much, and they sent it all around the world. And with now demand dropping, I don't think they're going to make any money at all if they keep it going. So I think they've come out of the market.
As vaccines go, those statistics, because most, if not all, vaccines may have some side effects, some more severe than some. Are those numbers within the benchmark for what is considered a safe vaccine?
Yes, unless they're considered within the benchmark of what's considered a safe drug as well. I mean, there are certain drugs around the place that are prescription drugs that would have worse side effects and worse levels of this particular thrombocytopenia, this reduction in platelets, than we've seen with the vaccine. So yeah, it is within the range. Yes, there's always, as you say, there's always side effects, and these side effects come out when I've really had the opportunity to come out with these vaccines because so many people have been vaccinated, billions of people. So it's very low numbers, but we see them. Usually you don't see the side effects so much because we're dealing with less people.
How do you expect the vaccine regime to continue now? I think I've had 3. You said you've had 3.
Yeah.
The first one, and of course, the 2 boosters thereafter. I think my second booster was a different vaccine. In terms of Well, let me ask this question. What's the status of the COVID-19 virus in the world from the latest reports?
It's still circulating. It's doing pretty much what I talked about, and what scientists talked about was the most likely scenario. But we didn't know it was 100% going to happen. But the most likely scenario is the virus is going to change over time, and it's going to become more transmissible because it wants to infect as many cells as possible until it reaches a sort of maximum state of transmissibility. But it's going to become less virulent, less nasty. And in the end, it's going to become an endemic virus, probably. What I mean by endemic, it's just spreading in the population. It's one of those viruses that we see coming back every year. It may become seasonal. At the moment, it's not really that seasonal, but it may become seasonal like flu and only occur at times of the year when people, when the conditions are right for it to appear, when people are inside in temperate zones, when people are inside. So we're in a situation now where it's going towards like an endemic virus. It's not as nasty as it was. It's still dangerous. It's still dangerous, as flu virus is still dangerous, as respiratory syncytial virus is still dangerous. These are viruses that are endemic in our populations. It's still affecting the same groups of people more seriously. In other words, older people and people with underlying health conditions. So those people still need to be frightened of this virus. It's still not affecting young people very much at all. It's never affected young people. In fact, it's not affecting people, under 50, under 60 very much. I had it this year. I've had it. It was a minor effect. I felt a bit funny, stayed, cold and sort of things like that. Got over it. That's the kind of thing we're seeing. However, we still have to take it seriously, especially if we're living in multi-age group families, if we have granny at home, grandpa at home, if somebody at home's got sickle cell, not so much sickle cell, but somebody's got an immunodeficient disease. We don't want to get it and pass it across to them. So we still have to think of the major good in a population. This is a population problem, not just for us. If we don't get protected, we're going to get the virus, and we're potentially going to spread it to somebody who is going to be much more severely affected. But it's still there. It's still out there, and it's going to be out there to stay.
Now, we've seen a lot of so-called bad flus in Trinidad and Tobago over the past couple of weeks. I mean, I got a dose of one, and people have been reporting that they're getting these flus. Almost nobody's testing these days anymore. Generally, that's the general perspective. So you get your flu, you ride it out, and you move on. Is there any way of knowing how pervasive it is in any particular society because of a diminished amount of testing?
Any way of knowing what? I missed the word you said.
How pervasive COVID is in any particular society because of a diminished amount of testing?
Yeah, no, not really now, because people aren't testing, I'm afraid. And all the surveillance type work is reduced. So it's only a matter of you or I. If we want to know what we've got, like I did, I had a test kit still there. My wife actually went to buy a test kit, and we knew we had COVID-19. Many of the viruses, many of these flus that are circulating at the moment, it could well be COVID. If people got one, and I would recommend people to get the test kits. You can buy them in the pharmacies still, because if you do feel a cold, slightly strange, a bit of a temperature, a slightly off color, I would advise to go and buy a test kit, because if you have got COVID, and I had it and didn't really think I had it, but I had it, and so did my wife, then you take precautions still. You do take precautions still. You stay at home. You don't go and see granny and grandpa. You don't go and see a friend of yours who might have some kind of health issue. You still have to do that. There are plenty of other viruses also, apart from COVID, that are circulating at the moment. And of course, we're still in the flu season just about, towards the end of it. My experience of influenza virus, one of the of a genuine influenza virus, when you get it, is you know it. I think I've only had influenza once in my life, and wow, did it hit me hard. You can't move, you're in bed, you just can hardly get to the loo, you know, it's like crawling across the floor, you feel so. That's what happened to me. But there are plenty of other viruses, other types of viruses that are causing colds and flu-like symptoms, but not as bad. We ride it out, and that's the way it is.
I remember when we were discussing the mRNA vaccines when they came out and the technology associated with it. There was an indication, I think, from the scientific community that this could be a breakthrough in also dealing with other types of diseases. The technology, have they made any progress in terms of that?
Not as, I'm sure they are making progress. I'm maybe not aware of it, because I absolutely was one of the people saying that this technology could be, and I think will be, groundbreaking. I think it takes quite a long time to carry out the tests and see that the technology is working for different kinds of conditions like cancer, for example. So often what happens with cancer is you have a particular gene, and we have lots of genes producing proteins. That's how we sort of work. A particular gene is not working properly. You know, one tiny gene out of the millions that we have is not producing the right protein, and that is affecting our cells, and that's resulting in some kind of cancer. And so the strength of mRNA technology is you can put the mRNA for that particular gene, the proper mRNA, the non-damaged mRNA, the correct mRNA, through a vaccine into our bodies. And it actually takes over producing that same protein and produces the proper protein, not the damaged protein that we're producing. So you can then, that can turn around or be part of a cure for cancer. And there's a number of conditions, lots and lots of conditions that are due to faults in our genes. We're producing malformed proteins and in our body. And so this mRNA technology, because it directly gives the ability to correct that, is massive potentially. But I haven't seen, and you know, I've been really, really busy, so maybe I haven't read it, but I haven't seen any headlines saying this particular mRNA treatment, I say treatment, not vaccine, it has actually contributed to curing this cancer. But I think it will. I'm still very, very positive about it, how it'll have very positive effects.
What's next in the virology scene? Are there any spots that the global experts like yourselves are tracking? Because I'm sure after that pandemic, people are the professionals are very sensitive to any little reports around the world.
Sadly, there is. And one of the big ones that we're tracking at the moment very, very closely is an influenza virus, avian influenza virus. So influenza viruses really have the ability to change and adapt much more efficiently than COVID-19, because they have different mechanisms where they change, and this particular avian influenza virus that's circulating around the world, it's unprecedented. We've seen it since about 2021, and now we're in 2024, and it spread. It spread across into the Americas and down into Cuba, into Venezuela, into South America, into the Antarctica. And it's because it's a matter of it can change and adapt. What it's done is it's changed to become more efficient at being transmitted in wild birds. And wild birds fly back and forward over the Caribbean all the time, and they transmit the virus mostly to birds, hence the name avian influenza. But again, this virus has changed as it does, and it's gained the ability to transmit to mammals, to terrestrial, as in land mammals, and water mammals, to lots and lots of different mammals. Okay, it's not able to transmit at the moment so efficiently from mammal to mammal in most cases, but it's affecting and killing many mammals. Recently, just last month, the Americans found that it's present in cattle. So it's gone from birds to cattle. It's now spreading from cattle to cattle. It's in milk. So cats on the farms are getting it. The good news is if the milk is pasteurized, it's killed. And if meat is cooked properly, it's killed. But this virus is doing lots and lots of very worrying things. It can get into humans, and it has got into humans, very close contact usually between birds when you slaughter them, or it can get into humans, and humans, most of the times humans die. It's high mortality in humans if it gets in, but it rarely gets in, and it doesn't then transmit from human to human. But because of the nature of the virus and the fact that it's very, very efficient at mutating and changing, we are watching this virus extremely carefully. A similar avian influenza virus jumped to humans in 1918, just after the First World War, and it killed more people than died in the First World War. Yeah, so that you asked a question and you got an answer. That we are looking very carefully at this avian influenza virus, this particular high pathogenic form.
What areas of the globe is it more prevalent now?
Much more prevalent.
What areas of the globe is it showing up most?
It's showing up in the Americas enormously now, because it's never been in South America. It's showing up before, and now it's gone all the way down to affecting sort of certain species of penguins in the Antarctica, and really, really worrying about some of the mammals down there, because there's such a high concentration of wildlife down there, potentially susceptible to avian influenza. We're looking very, very, very closely. It's still spreading in Asia, where it came from. It came across from Asia. It's spreading in Europe. It's spreading in Africa. It's really, really very, very abundant, this particular high pathogenic form of the virus.
Tell me something, tell me something, Professor. You know, I know I've watched a couple of documentaries where they're looking for the holy grail of the perfect vaccine that will be the cure-all for all manner of viruses that attack humans. I'm not so sure about, of course, the other life on the planet, which we have to be concerned about. So I'm asking you now a question in terms of the era of AI. And of course, we are in the burgeoning and early stages of AI. Do you, as a scientific mind, see AI as possibly assisting dramatically in the formulation of new vaccines in terms of going forward, in terms of viruses?
Yeah, great question. Yeah, I mean, it's amazing what's happening with AI at the moment. We don't really even, I think we're at the tip of the iceberg. I don't think we'll understand how much impact it's going to have on various areas. And I think science and things like vaccine discovery and vaccine vaccine design. Yeah, I mean, because often with vaccine design, you're looking at to identify very small areas of a particular virus that you're going to be using as a potential vaccine, because that's the sort of immunogenic area of the vaccine. And to get AI helping with the identification of those kind of parts to different viruses, different bacteria, helping in the design of vaccines. I don't think there's going to be a holy grail of a vaccine that's going to be produced that's going to protect us from all pathogens or all viruses, because that's not how our immune system works. Our immune system is very specific to each particular pathogen or each particular virus. However, I think AI will support and help in the designing of what we call multiplex vaccines where you can put different viral genomes, viral parts of viruses into vaccines, so you get multiple you get your vaccines against multiple pathogens. I think AI will have a massive positive effect on being able to identify different areas, to be able to analyze. For example, we've talked about sequencing. You have to sequence the genetic makeup of all these viruses, all these bacteria, to be able to then understand that what does what in the virus, what does what in the bacteria. AI is going to have a big impact on helping us with that. So yes, the answer to your question is it will be an enormous aid, but a holy grail of vaccine against everything is probably not attainable.
Are there longitudinal studies being done on going back to the vaccine, on persons who would have taken the vaccines that are ongoing in terms of the long-term effect of the vaccines, the different types of vaccines?
I think there probably are, to be honest with you, but I would imagine the scientists have identified that as a study that they're doing, and they're carrying out long-term studies, longitudinal studies of people who've been vaccinated with one particular type of vaccine or two particular types. I think these studies do take quite a long time to come out, and there's also an enormous amount of literature out there, so I might have missed it because it's difficult to keep up to date. But this is the kind of work that scientists would want to do. Also looking, of course, there's a lot of work being done on long COVID, and people still being affected by sort of long COVID, which is a sort of a debilitating disease that we still don't really understand, and is probably like a post-viral condition. Sometimes with viruses, we see these post-viral conditions, which are not so much due to the virus, but they're due to the response, the immune response of the person. We respond with antibodies with our immune response in different ways. So understanding better possible long-term effects of vaccines, possible long-term effects of viral infection is something that will be coming out in the peer review literature, and will be probably being done.
All right, Professor, thank you so much for being with us this morning. Always great talking to you to get an update on what's happening in the world of virology.